Commander Zextar of the Vax Empire stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the blue-green planet spinning lazily before him. Earth, the newest member of the Galactic Alliance. How quaint that such a primitive species had somehow stumbled their way into interstellar politics. As a seasoned military strategist who had conquered 17 different civilizations across the galaxy, Zextar had seen it all. But humans, they were barely worth his attention. The Vax Empire controlled nearly half of the known galaxy, their advanced technology and superior intellect making them the dominant force among the stars. Other species either bent the knee or were crushed beneath the Empire's might. When Earth had joined the Galactic Alliance just 5 years ago, Zextar had laughed. These humans with their crude chemical rockets and their simple minds would be easily subjugated when the time came. That time had apparently arrived sooner than expected. The emergency communication from the Alliance Council crackled to life on his console. All member species are to maintain neutrality in the current conflict between the Vax Empire and Terra, the robotic voice announced. Any intervention will be met with severe sanctions. Zextar smiled. The fools thought their little alliance could protect them. He had already received word from Emperor Nixatal himself. Earth was to be made an example of. Their defiance would cost them everything. The conflict had begun 3 days ago, when human diplomats had refused to submit to the Vax Empire's protection mandate, essentially a demand for complete surrender disguised as a diplomatic offer. The humans had not only refused, but had also told the Vax delegation exactly where they could file their mandate. The language used had been particularly colorful according to the reports. Sir called his communications officer Tirak. The human fleet has taken position near their moon. Preliminary scans show they have assembled their entire military force. Zextar studied the tactical display. 60 ships. That was their entire fleet. He had 300 vessels at his disposal, each one technologically superior to anything the humans possessed. This would be over by dinner time. Begin the assault, he commanded. Target their orbital installations first. Show them the futility of resistance. The first wave of Vax fighters screamed toward Earth's vicinity, their energy weapons charging for what should have been a devastating opening salvo. Zextar watched confidently as his forces approached the human perimeter. Then something unexpected happened. The human ships didn't retreat to defensive positions as any rational military force would. Instead, they charged straight at the incoming Vax fleet. Zextar frowned. Were they suicidal? No military doctrine he knew of recommended such a reckless approach. Sir, Track reported, his voice uncertain. The humans aren't following standard engagement protocols. They're ramming our fighters. What? Zextar leaned forward, studying the display. Sure enough, human vessels were deliberately colliding with Vax fighters at high speed. The humans were weaponizing their own ships as projectiles. That's impossible. No species would sacrifice their vessels so carelessly. But there it was on the screen. Human ships, often smaller than their Vax counterparts, were slamming into enemy vessels with devastating effect. The kinetic energy alone was tearing through Vax shields. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the humans, Tirak announced. Put it through, Zextar ordered, curiosity overriding his irritation. A human appeared on the screen, a female with graying hair and steel in her eyes. This is Admiral Sarah Jackson of the Terran Defense Force. You made a big mistake coming here. Zextar almost laughed. Your primitive tactics won't save you, human. You've sacrificed a dozen ships for perhaps 3 of ours. Jackson smiled, and something about that expression made Zextar uncomfortable. Oh, we're just getting started. By the way, you might want to check on your supply lines. The transmission cut out. Zextar immediately ordered a status report from his rear echelons. The response made his blood run cold. Human attack groups had appeared throughout Vax space, hitting supply convoys and military installations with surgical precision. They had somehow bypassed all Vax detection systems and were wreaking havoc behind enemy lines. How is this possible? Zexitar demanded. Our sensors should have detected any movement. Dr. Elena Vasquez tapped her tablet aboard the USTV Defiance, reviewing the latest intelligence reports. The initial phase of what the crew had dubbed Operation Going Postal was proceeding better than expected. As Earth's chief strategic consultant, she had spent years studying military history from ancient Earth conflicts to the latest alien warfare techniques gathered from Alliance databases. The Vax are responding exactly as predicted, she informed Captain Mike Thompson. They're trying to adapt to our ramming tactics, but they haven't figured out our real advantage yet. Which is? Thompson asked, though he knew the answer. Humans are batshit crazy, Dr. Vasquez replied with a grin. Every other species follows logical, predictable patterns of warfare. They calculate acceptable losses. They follow protocols. They value self-preservation above all else. We don't. The Defiance shuddered as it engaged another Vax destroyer. But instead of the traditional energy weapon exchange, the human crew released a cloud of metal debris mixed with industrial coolant. The freezing mixture gummed up the Vax ship's external sensors and cooling systems, causing it to overheat and shut down non-essential systems. Humans are improvisers. Dr. Vasquez continued watching the disabled enemy vessel drift helplessly. We don't just think outside the box, we completely forget there was ever a box to begin with. Meanwhile, in the Kuiper Belt, Lieutenant Jake Florida Man Morrison was about to make intergalactic military history. His small attack craft had been damaged in the initial engagement, life support failing weapons offline. Any sane being would have retreated or surrendered. Jake Morrison was not sane by conventional standards. Control this is Florida Man. He transmitted over the comm. I've got a situation here. Florida Man returned to base immediately for repairs, came the response. Negative control. I've got a Vax dreadnought in range and I'm feeling creative. Jake grabbed the minder iron he'd brought from home, a memento from his previous career as a mechanic. He also grabbed his emergency supply of caffeinated soda and industrial fertilizer. Don't ask why he had these all mopsies on a military vessel. Florida Man, what are you doing? Control demanded. Something stupidly brilliant, Jake replied, suiting up for EVA. Or brilliantly stupid. I can never tell the difference. Back on the Vax flagship, Zexistar was beginning to understand. He was facing something unprecedented. The humans weren't just fighting unpredictably. They were fighting with a combination of desperation, creativity, and complete disregard for conventional wisdom that made them impossibly dangerous. His tactical computer, which had successfully predicted enemy movements in 1,000 previous campaigns, was flashing error messages. The artificial intelligence simply couldn't process the chaos that was human warfare. Sir, we're getting reports from across the battlefield, Tarak reported, his voice shaking. Sector 7. Humans used musical instruments to disrupt our communication frequencies. Sector 12. They've weaponized coffee somehow. Sector 19. One of their fighters just painted Yeet T on the side of our command ship. What does Yeet mean? Zextar asked weakly. We don't know, sir, but they keep saying it before they do something extremely dangerous and effective. Lieutenant Morrison had EVA'd out of his damaged fighter and was now crawling across the hull of the massive Vax dreadnought. The ship's point defense systems couldn't target something as small as a single human, and its thick armor plating provided handholds. Control, I'm at the dreadnought's main power coupling, Morrison whispered into his comm. Florida Man, whatever you're thinking, don't. Too late, Morrison interrupted. He had stuffed industrial fertilizer into the power coupling, doused it with caffeine soda. The sugar content was crucial for the chemical reaction and was now raising his tire iron like a mystical weapon. Let's see if 30 years of Florida living prepared me for this, he muttered, bringing the tire iron down hard on the jury-rigged explosive device. The explosion tore through the dreadnought's power systems, cascading through the ship in a way the Vax's engineers had never anticipated. Within minutes, the mighty vessel was dead in space, its crew frantically trying to understand how a single human with a tire iron had disabled their most powerful warship. Dr. Vasquez received the report and shook her head in amazement. "I don't even want to know the physics of how that worked," she said. "Some things are better left mysterious." The tide of battle was turning. As news of the dreadnought's destruction spread through both fleets, human morale soared while Vax confidence crumbled. They had come expecting to crush a primitive species, and instead found themselves facing an enemy that fought like a force of nature, chaotic, unpredictable, and absolutely relentless. Zexstar watched his fleet's formation dissolve into chaos as human units used increasingly bizarre tactics. One group had somehow turned asteroids into smart munitions. Another had disabled 3 cruisers by filling the space around them with reflective glitter, causing their own targeting systems to misfire in the confusion. "How do we fight an enemy that doesn't follow the rules?" he asked no one in particular. Tarak offered tentatively, "Perhaps we should study their approach." "Study madness." Zexstar laughed bitterly. "They don't have a strategy. They're making it up as they go along. How do you plan against chaos itself?" As if to emphasize his point, a human fighter craft suddenly emerged from behind his flagship's sensor array. According to all logic, nothing should have been able to hide there. The pilot was literally welding additional armor plating to his ship in the middle of combat, using sparks as a form of impromptu fireworks display. The human pilot opened a channel. "Hey there, love what you've done with the place. Very spaceshipy. Mind if I redecorate?" Before Zexitar could respond, the human had launched a salvo of what appeared to be furniture. No, those were chairs. Metal chairs welded together into an improvised kinetic projectile. The absurd weapon smashed into the flagship's sensor array, sending the bridge into darkness. In the darkness of space, Dr. Vasquez's theories about human warfare were being proven with brutal efficiency. The humans weren't just unpredictable. They were adaptively unpredictable. As soon as the Vax began to counter one tactic, the humans would invent 3 new ones, each more unconventional than the last. Engineer Sarah Kim, aboard the USTV Persistence, had turned her ship into a mobile scrapyard. Using magnetic grappling systems, she was collecting debris from destroyed vessels and turning them into improvised weapons and equipment. Her latest creation was a railgun made from salvaged alien technology and Earth-manufactured components that by all rights shouldn't work together. "It's like building a computer out of rocks and lightning," she explained to her crew. "Shouldn't be possible, but here we are." The railgun fired, sending a projectile made of compressed space junk through 2 Vax frigates. The aliens had no defense against weapons that didn't exist until 5 minutes before they were used. Admiral Jackson watched the battle unfold from the USTV Sovereign, coordinating what could generously be called organized chaos. The humans had no grand strategy in the traditional sense. Instead, they had thousands of small strategies, each one adapted to the immediate situation. "Ma'am," reported her communications officer, "we're receiving surrender offers from the Vax fleet." Jackson considered this. The Vax had superior technology, bigger ships, more experience. But they had made one fatal error. They had assumed humans would fight like every other species they'd encountered. Logical, predictable, cautious. "Ask them if they're ready to discuss terms," she said. "But keep the boys and girls ready. I have a feeling Zexitar isn't done yet." She was right. Zexitar, his pride in shambles and his fleet in retreat, was contemplating one final gambit. If conventional warfare wouldn't work against these insane humans, perhaps unconventional warfare would. "Track," he ordered, "activate the planet killer." His communications officer's eyes widened. "Sir, the Galactic Alliance specifically forbids weapons of mass destruction." "The humans broke the rules first," Zexitar snarled. "They fight without honor, without logic. We'll see how they handle total annihilation." The massive weapon began charging drawing power from the entire Vaxi fleet. It was designed to crack planets, to boil oceans, to end worlds. Earth would become a cautionary tale whispered throughout the galaxy. But humans had been preparing for this exact scenario. Dr. Vasquez had spent years studying alien military technology, not just to understand how it worked, but to find ways to turn it against itself. And the Vax Planet Killer had a fundamental design flaw that its creators had never considered. All units. Admiral Jackson transmitted across the human fleet. Operation Uno Reverse Card is a go. Across Earth's vicinity, hidden human ships emerged from asteroid fields and debris clouds where they'd been waiting. Each one carried a carefully crafted piece of technology that Dr. Vasquez had designed, a quantum resonance disruptor that could theoretically turn the planet killer's energy beam back on itself. Sir, Track reported urgently human vessels are moving to intercept our blast radius. What the Vax couldn't comprehend was that humans had weaponized suicide itself. Each ship was crewed by volunteers who had accepted a one-way mission. But this wasn't desperation. It was calculated sacrifice. The planet killer fired. The beam of annihilation lanced toward Earth, carrying enough energy to shatter continents. But as it struck the first human interceptor ship, something impossible happened. The ship didn't vaporize. Instead, its quantum resonance disruptor began folding space-time around itself, creating a tunnel that redirected the beam's energy. One by one, the human ships formed a chain of redirected energy, each ship taking a piece of the beam and sending it in a new direction. The massive death ray began to curve its destructive power, turning back toward its source. Sextar watched in horror as his own superweapon came back at him. "How?" he whispered. "How did they know?" Lieutenant Morrison, somehow still alive, and now aboard the lead interceptor ship, answered over the comm. "Dude, we had this thing called physics class in school. Plus, one of our scientists watched a lot of anime. Turns out cartoon logic works in space. Who knew?" The redirected beam struck the Vax flagship, but instead of destroying it, the human modifications had turned the weapon into something else entirely. It phased the ship's weapon systems, leaving the crew unharmed but completely defenseless. Across the battlefield, Vax vessels found themselves similarly affected. Their massive fleet had been transformed from a force of conquest into a collection of floating museums. Admiral Jackson opened a channel to all ships. "Attention Vax fleet. This is your one and only opportunity to surrender. We promise you'll be treated fairly, fed well, and most importantly kept safe from our more creative pilots." Sextar looked around his powerless bridge. His empire had sent their finest fleet to subdue a primitive species and had been thoroughly outmaneuvered by creatures who fought like they were having fun. "We surrender," he said quietly. The aftermath of what historians would call the Battle of Improbable Tactics was swift. The Galactic Alliance convened an emergency session to discuss the implications of human warfare. Representatives from dozens of species sat in stunned silence as they reviewed battle recordings. The Crystalline Collective's ambassador spoke first. They used furniture as weapons. They turned a pop culture reference into a battle cry, added the Fungoid Federation's representative, referring to humans' use of yeet. One of them disabled a dreadnought with a tire iron, whispered the mechanic hive mind. A tire iron. We redesign our entire military doctrine around optimal tool usage, and they use a tire iron. Dr. Vasquez, representing humanity at the proceedings, cleared her throat. "If I may address the Council's concerns." "You may," said the Alliance Prime Speaker, an ancient being whose species had been studying warfare for millennia. "Please explain how your species achieved victory against a technologically superior force." Dr. Vasquez smiled. "We didn't follow any rules, because to us there weren't any rules. Each species in this galaxy has developed military doctrine based on logic, efficiency, and predictable patterns. Humans developed military doctrine based on, what if we tried this really stupid thing and it somehow worked? She activated a holographic display showing various moments from the battle. We didn't win because we were better. We won because we were different. Every other species thinks like a computer. Input data process, output optimal solution. Humans think like chaos engines. We take input data, add random variables, multiply by why not, and output something that shouldn't work, but somehow does. The raptorial hierarch leaned forward. Are you saying human military strategy is based on unpredictability? I'm saying human military strategy is unpredictability. Dr. Vasquez corrected. We don't have battle plans. We have general directions and a willingness to improvise. The Vax came expecting to fight an army. They got a circus instead. Zexistar, now under Alliance custody, but permitted to observe the proceedings, finally understood. Humans hadn't beaten the Vax through superior technology or training. They had won by refusing to engage in the type of warfare the Vax understood. The Alliance Prime Speaker spoke after a long moment of silence. The Council recognizes that humanity has demonstrated unique tactical capabilities. The question now is what to do about it. Admiral Jackson stood. With respect, Prime Speaker, humanity didn't start this conflict. We simply finished it. We seek only to defend ourselves and our allies. If left in peace, we're happy to share our unique perspective on problem solving with any who wish to learn. And if not left in peace? Asked the manted Swarm Queen. Jackson's smile was both friendly and slightly terrifying. Well, we've got a lot more tire irons where that came from. The vote was unanimous. Humanity would receive special autonomous status within the Galactic Alliance. Their territory declared inviolate, their tactical support available to Alliance members who requested it. More importantly, a new law was passed. No member species shall engage in offensive warfare against Terra. This is for their own safety. After the formal proceedings, Zextar approached Dr. Vasquez privately. I must ask, he said, how did you know our planet killer could be redirected? Dr. Vasquez chuckled. Honestly, we didn't. The quantum resonance disruptor was based on theoretical physics and engineering principles from a cartoon show. We thought there was maybe a 20% chance it would work. 20%, Zextar's eyes widened. You risked everything on a 20% chance. Welcome to human military doctrine, she replied. Never tell us the odds. As delegates filed out of the Alliance chamber, a new understanding settled across the galaxy. Humans didn't just fight wars. They reinvented the concept of warfare itself. They were the species that could turn a tire iron into a strategic weapon, transform energy weapons into art projects, and somehow make defeat taste like victory for their opponents. Lieutenant Morrison, now somehow promoted to colonel. The promotion itself involved a story too bizarre to fully recount, was giving interviews to galactic media. When asked about his destruction of the Dreadnought, he simply shrugged. Look, I'm from Florida. Weird stuff happens all the time there. Fighting space aliens with a tire iron. That's like a Tuesday for us. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to return this tire iron to my cousin. He needs it to fix his airboat. Dr. Elena Vasquez found herself appointed as Director of Strategic Innovation for the Alliance military. Her first directive was to establish the Human Combat Doctrine Integration Program, essentially teaching other species how to think like humans in combat situations. The key, she explained to her first class of alien military officers, is to ask yourself, what would a rational being never do in this situation, and then do that. A tentacled elder raised one of its appendages. But surely there are limits to this philosophy. Dr. Vasquez smiled. Our greatest victory came from a mechanic with a tire iron. I'm not sure limits apply to us. The integration was not without challenges. Several species attempted to achieve human-like unpredictability through algorithmic randomness, completely missing the point. Others tried to train their troops to think irrationally with disastrous results. You can't teach crazy, Admiral Jackson observed during one training session. It's not a you skill. It's more like a lifestyle choice. Meanwhile, across human space, new defensive preparations began incorporating lessons learned from the Vax conflict. Citizens were encouraged to maintain stockpiles of random household items that could be weaponized in emergencies. Engineering schools added courses in improvised technology application. The military established the Office of Creative Solutions, tasked with developing weapons that shouldn't work but somehow did. Zex Star eventually released and returned to his people, found himself changed by his encounter with humanity. He established the Vax Institute for Unconventional Warfare, dedicated to studying human military philosophy. His first publication, Why Logic is the Enemy of Victory, became required reading in military academies across the galaxy. The humans taught us something valuable, he would later write. We spent so long trying to perfect war that we forgot war is inherently imperfect. The humans embrace that imperfection and turn it into strength. Years passed. The Battle of Improbable Tactics became legend. Human military advisors were sought after throughout the galaxy not for their superior technology, but for their ability to see solutions where others saw only problems. Dr. Vasquez, now in her twilight years, reflected on humanity's unique place in the galactic community. We didn't become the strongest species in the galaxy, she mused. We became the species that redefined what strength means. The human approach to warfare had fundamentally changed galactic politics. Where once conflicts were settled through predictable displays of force, now creative solution finding was valued above military might. The Universal Declaration of Creative Solutions, drafted by human diplomats, established new protocols for conflict resolution that emphasized innovation over destruction. Admiral Jackson, now retired, wrote in her memoirs, "We went to war to defend our home. We ended up defending the very idea of home. Not just for humans, but for every species that valued creative thinking over brute force." The most significant change was in how other species viewed conflict itself. Pre-human warfare had been about imposing order through superior force. Post-human warfare was about finding unexpected solutions that benefited everyone involved. The humans had weaponized cooperation itself. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison never did return that tire iron to his cousin. It now sits in the Galactic Museum of Military History, labeled simply, "The tool that changed the nature of warfare. Handle with respect and moderate confusion." The label was added by human curators naturally. As for Earth itself, the planet evolved into a center of learning and innovation. Students came from across the galaxy to study at human institutions, hoping to unlock the secret of human creativity. Most left more puzzled than when they arrived, carrying with them a new appreciation for the impossible. The final line of the official Alliance report on the conflict perhaps summed it up best. Humanity did not win through superior tactics, technology, or training. They won by redefining what it means to win. In the end, the galaxy is a safer place, not because humans are warriors, but because they are artists, and they paint outside the lines on a canvas that covers the stars. And in the depths of space where the Battle of Improbable Tactics had raged, a small memorial drift in orbit around Earth. It bears a simple inscription in hundreds of languages. Here, the impossible became inevitable. Here, the absurd proved triumphant. Here, humanity showed the galaxy that the best strategies made are the ones nobody sees coming. Every year, on the anniversary of the battle, representatives from across the galaxy gather at the memorial. They share stories, exchange ideas, and invariably ask the same question: how did they know it would work? The answer, as always, comes from the human representative: we didn't. But that's never stopped us before. And somewhere in the galaxy, in a small bar on a forgotten space station, a tired old alien mercenary tells stories to anyone who'll listen. He was there, he says. He saw humans fight a war with tire irons and furniture, with music and mathematics, with pure stubborn refusal to accept that something couldn't be done. They're not warriors. He always concludes his tale. There's something far more dangerous. They're improvisers. And when you can improvise a victory from a tire iron and some coffee, well, the universe becomes a very different place indeed. The bartender, a philosophical sort, usually responds, perhaps that's what the universe needed, a species to remind us all that there's always another way. And as the stories continue and the drinks flow, one truth becomes clear to all who hear these tales. The day humans went to war was the day warfare itself evolved, not into something more terrible, but into something more human. And that perhaps was the greatest victory of all.